Alrighty. We're good there, I think. Audio coming. Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. Going to flag the bumpers in 3, 2. The Mind of a Geek podcast is brought to you by Inked Geek Studios. Be sure to check out inkedgeekstudios.com for this and other great shows. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 1 of the Mind of a Geek podcast. I will be your host for this show. I am Nate. This is going to be a new weekly interview show on the Inked Geek Studios network. And for my first guest of this show, the cherry popper of Mind of a Geek, I invite Mr. J.F.Dubeau. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. Now, I did not know this was going to be that level of intimacy. I would have prepared. I would have lit some candles.
Worn a collar shirt.
Yeah, something with an ascot, maybe.
Spritzed a little cologne.
Mm-hmm. Have some oysters.
Oh yes. So yeah, I'm excited. New show, new guest.
I am too. I'm this first time I'm the first guest on anything of interest. So I'm nervous. I'm excited.
Very cool. Well, for our listeners that may not know who you are, Mr. Dubeau here is he's an author. He's got one book that is coming out very shortly and another book that he's working on. He also podcasts. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. The first thing I want to hit, because I love art and I love putting art to story, is you're a comic writer. Now, is that something you still currently do or something that you've put on hold?
It's something that's currently on hold. Comic books is kind of I have to say, it's the gateway drug to storytelling for me. It's for most people, it's like one of the first things that we get into as far as reading narratives. And I have my diploma in graphic design. I do a lot of illustration. I'm not super good at it because most of the times when a lot of people tell me, "Oh, it looks great." So yeah, but it's not what I wanted to get out of it. So I find visual arts very frustrating. And for a while, I had a webcomic that I did for a full year, 1 page a week, and it was going fine. But I found the experience a bit too frustrating, so I kind of put it on hiatus until I can get some other projects taken care of.
Very cool. So that's kind of leads into the next thing that you kind of told me about yourself is with your miniatures and you're painting miniatures. So that obviously takes that art. And, you're going from a digital form to a physical form there. Is that a passion that you find? Do those blend together well? I mean, you've told me that you won awards for armies that you painted. So obviously you have talent there. So which came first, the digital art or the miniature art?
Well, definitely the illustration digital art came first. I've been drawing and doodling since I was, 4. So it's something that's always been what I've wanted to do. And the funny thing, I originally wanted to study and go into medicine. I had this very complicated plan to go into this very, very specific career where I've always been fascinated by criminology and by medicine. And I've always wanted to work in art. And there is actually a job that exists that combines all three of these things, which is a pathological illustrator, whose job it is to essentially go to corpses and crime scene and draw things. So you need some basic knowledge of medicine, some knowledge of law and criminology, and you need to be somewhat talented as an illustrator to achieve that. And there's maybe, in the province of Quebec where I live, there's maybe 3 of these guys. So it's not a job that you have a lot. And right today, they probably use a lot of digital techniques. So I wanted to go and study medicine to do that. And my family pretty much told me, no, you're maybe a bit too dumb for the medical part. So why don't you concentrate on the graphics and become a designer? And I went, you know what? Sure. because I at that point I had done a summer internship with a graphic designer, and I like the environment that I was working in with him was super dynamic, was super chill, was a lot of fun, learning a lot of stuff. So that was cool, and so I was sure I'll study that.
Well, that works. It was funny when you phrased it that way. It reminded me of an Eddie Izzard bit where he talks about how he was a British kid in school and he was talking to the guidance counselor and he was like, "I want to be a famous person and tour the world." And he goes, "You're British, so tone it down a little bit."
yeah, I remember. That's the I listened to that really recently too.
That was
the one he did.
That was the tea and cake or death one.
Yeah, like that show has a name. It was in San Fran that he taped it. It was a special.
Or The City.
And Dressed to Kill.
Yes. It was I think one of his best ones. I'm a big Eddie Izzard fan.
I love Eddie Izzard.
Tea and cake or death. So my options are or death. Such a great album. Check him out, everybody.
Eddie Izzard. Absolutely.
Although don't listen to his new one. It's not that good.
Oh, really?
I didn't feel like it had the pizzazz.
Oh. Well, he's less flamboyant now.
He is.
But enough about him. Let's talk about me. Or rather, let's go back to your show.
Fair enough. Oh, tangents are what I do.
Oh,
that's actually...
Nate, this is going to be a long show.
It is.
I don't know if you've heard interviews with me before, but
no, but I've played Cards Against Humanity with you, and all we ever do is talk. It's like, oh, it's somebody else's turn? Well, shit.
Oh, we can swear?
Oh, of course we can, dude. This is an Inked Geek Studios podcast.
I'm going to keep it clean.
No,
right.
Yeah. No intense vulgarity. You're Canadian. I don't want to offend you.
So, yeah, you were asking about the miniatures, and I went on a tangent.
Yeah, we both did. Continue.
So here's the thing about the miniature thing is that whereas a lot of people, and that's the same thing about graphic design, like a lot of people think, oh, that's so artistic. It's really not. And that's what's great about miniature painting is that miniature painting is like having a very, very big toolbox of tricks. And the only thing that's creative about it is picking colors. Because after that is just applying the right technique, the right trick to the correct effect you want to do. So there's no talent and there's very little artistry.
So it's essentially like a 3D coloring book.
It's like a 3D coloring book with really complicated textures. Right. But anybody that really wants to be a really good miniature painter, all they need to do there's really just 3 ingredients: equipment, because you need so many weird products to do the job correctly. You need YouTube, so you can go watch videos to tell you how to do things, and you need patience to apply the amount of time necessary to get the results you want. But do you need to understand art and all that? No, I've seen some miniatures with absolutely terrible color combinations, but the techniques were so well applied that they still won prizes because whatever. So the reason why I do miniature painting is because it is so relaxing. It's a completely zen experience. I can just sit down and just paint for hours.
Right, kind of a meditative state for you.
Exactly.
Now, do you play the miniature games as well, or are you more just on the art side of it, or the quote unquote?
I play the miniature game. To me, it's like it's a package. I don't understand people who play without painting, and I have a bit of trouble understanding people who paint without playing. I am terrible at the game. The awards I've won mostly for my painting have been as a team effort at a convention called Adepticon. Me and a bunch of other guys from the province here, we go every year. We've been going since 2010, I want to say, and we keep winning awards when we go there. But it's a team effort, and the instructions I've gotten as far as gameplay is concerned during the tournaments that we participated is shut up and just roll dice, but don't think too hard.
Right.
Like my job is to talk to judges and paint some figurines, because when it comes down to actually playing and doing strategies, my team's pretty much given up on me. And they're right.
So in the same way that your family gave up on you in the medical field, your friends have given up on you in the miniatures field.
Yes,
we're sensing a pattern here.
Well, to be fair, I have gotten better because one of the guys on my team, a guy called Dominique Carrette, he's a decent painter, but he is an amazing strategist. Mostly because he's the kind of guy who he will look at the meta of the game and instead of saying how can I imitate this, he thinks, okay, well the top players are going to bring this meta to the tournament, so I need something that breaks that.
Right.
And he's amazing at figuring them out. I've played doubles tournaments with him on a few occasions, and several times we would have games that they look like lost cause. And he would say, no, keep your shit together, JF, and we will get through this. We'll at least fight for a draw, but I think we can squeeze out a victory. And every single time we've won in very desperate battles, very heroic battles on the field, just because he's got a knack for predicting things 3 turns in advance.
Nice. I think that's a mindset for a lot of professional competitions, whether it be the physical space or the virtual space. Like Hearthstone, for example, it's the best players aren't, okay, what's the meta? How do I replicate it? It's, okay, what's the meta? How do I break it?
Exactly. It's about not just understanding what works for everybody else, but understanding the game. There's just this kind of transcendent moment where you go from, I understand how to use the meta to I understand how to create the meta.
Right.
How am I the guy who plays Hearthstone who doesn't copy other people's decks, but whose decks get copied by other people.
Right.
And that's what I find always a bit bizarre by people. Oh, I want to be a professional. I want to be part of the best, so I'm going to copy the best. It's like, no, you need to copy how the best think.
Right. Copy their mindset, their creative thinking. Very, very true. I like that. That works. Breaking the meta. I think that's what I'll name this episode. Breaking the meta.
Oh, that's cool. And it's one of the things, like, we were playing, I don't know if I was playing with you, but I was playing with a bunch of people, and they were talking, playing Overwatch, and we were talking about, oh, the meta is set in this and that. It's like, dudes, we're like 2 months into the beta.
Right.
There's no meta. There's no real meta. Everything's still super fluid.
Everything's getting changed every week. And
exactly. And such a small percentage of the population is playing the game at this point. Like, nothing is set in stone. Calm the fuck down.
It's not even really like, and even the element of it being a beta, like that. I mean, that's very true. But I always found it interesting when, like, you're playing a casual quick match game with people on like Heroes, and they're like, "Oh, well, you picked that guy. He's not part of the meta." I'm like, "You're playing quick match, bro. Stop being a tryhard."
I get that. Like, I get that when I'm playing. I mean, I played a bit of Heroes earlier today, and like, there's always this one guy says, "There's no one pushing the middle lane," or like some comments like, "Are you?" My response is always, "Why are you afraid? We're playing as the AI." It's like, if you're afraid of losing against the AI, chances are you don't know the game enough to comment on what's going on. So maybe a bit of shutting up.
It's like, I'm just gonna watch YouTube videos and then bitch when people don't do that.
Exactly. No, exactly. Which is funny because my favorite YouTube videos for Heroes of Storm is when people are doing something completely off the walls.
Right.
Like, a good example, that was funny. I think it was one of the finales for Heroes of Storm, the Road to BlizzCon. Some guy pulled out like this really weird Abathur build in the final game, and it was amazing. And like, the commenters were saying, "Oh, we haven't seen this before. I wonder if this is going to work. It's kind of risky," and it totally paid off. And this is where you can see drawing the line between the imitators and the actual professionals, and like the top players. The top players will have this ace up their sleeve, this unusual strategy, this way of doing things that is not part of the mainstream, because people expect the mainstream, and you don't want to be predictable when you're trying to win.
Right. If it was all about copying the best, we'd all be pro gamers.
Exactly. Because they're just games. It's not hard.
Right. Exactly. Well, enough about video games.
Fair enough.
I know. Like, I say that, and 20 minutes later we'll be.
just a quick question before. So have you started getting the cold sweats and the shakes?
I didn't have the Overwatch beta. I was only in the opening weekend. So listen, asshole. No,
Look, let me
I'm.
put it to you this way. It's you didn't get the heroin, and that's really sad because you never got high. But now at least you don't have to deal with the with withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah, no, you know, I was walking down the street when a junkie just shoved a needle in my arm, and I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Shit, where did he go? No. And now I find out that they've taken all the druggies off the streets for a month and a half.
Yeah, now there's a lot of people at street corners just shaking.
Right.
I mean, I've been playing a lot of Heroes of the Storm, but it really is the methadone of of Overwatch addiction.
You know what would have been even better? And like this obviously would have been a good thing, but I digress. It would have been funny to think about the fact that they're like, all right, so we're going to take the Overwatch beta from you, but if you had access to the Overwatch beta, we're going to give you Tracer now in Heroes of the Storm, just so you can remember what it's like to play Overwatch, and every time you select her, know that you can't play Overwatch right now.
And Tracer's super fun in Overwatch.
She is. I like a lot of people, I hated her at first because she's so difficult to play right. And then as I got used to it.
If you're like to be a really, really good Tracer player, you need to forget kills and you need to remember that your job is distracting and flanking. Like if you kill 3 bastions at key moments in the game, you've done your job, even if you only get those 3 kills.
Right. I was having a lot of fun as Mercy, and I was doing a good job healing with her. I actually got a shout out on Twitter from Bo Schwartz, Gorath, and a couple other people because I was running with them. And got some shout-outs with them for my healing abilities, and I felt pretty good about that because that was my first night playing. So I'm like, either I found my niche for this game, or she's really easy to play.
Mercy's one of those characters that's really hard to play if you don't get it.
Oh, well, I guess I did fairly well then.
Yeah, I'm not an expert with Mercy. I've only played her a couple of times, and it's kind of like Tracer. Like you can easily feel like you're sucking if you're not doing it properly, but if you do it properly, it can be kind of like smooth and easy.
Right. Well, while we're talking about this wonderful, wonderful Blizzard game, let's at least use that to transition into one of the things about you, and that is the Overcast podcast. So,
right.
As opposed to this turning into a bonus episode of Overcast.
Right. No, look, there's a reason why I do that podcast is because I could talk about this game forever.
Oh, I'm sure. If I ever need a guest and I'm totally brain dead and can't think of any questions, I'll just bring you on and we'll talk about Overwatch.
Yeah, you can just say, "Hey, Overwatch." I'm saying, "Yes, absolutely, Overwatch."
So for those for listeners that don't know, where have you been? But other than that, if you're not a gamer or whatever, are you putting on like an Overwatch? Yes, you are. For our visual viewers, yeah. There's the Overwatch hoodie. Those are nice, by the way.
It's so beautiful.
Blizzard.
It's so comfortable.
Blizzard gamer clothing is some of the best gamer clothing out there. But anyway, so Overwatch, if you're not familiar, it's a first-person shooter made by Blizzard of World of Warcraft, StarCraft fame. Lost Vikings fame, if I may.
Of course.
I think they made a one-off Superman game that was horrible as well too.
Well, they don't like to talk about it.
No, I know.
from what I understand,
that's like that one bad one-night stand that your buddy had that you always remind him of.
It's like maybe if I put a bag on her head.
Beauty is a light switch away.
Wow, we're horrible. We're terrible people.
We'll turn the lights out on the Superman game. But anyway, so you do this podcast. It's with Miss Amy Frost, who is going to be an upcoming guest on this episode. So she
will probably be a lot more entertaining than I am.
Check out our schedule to find out when. I don't even think me and her know when yet, so stay tuned. But anyway, so you do this. Is this now? I was going to ask you if this was the first podcast that you were ever a part of, but you did mention in an earlier conversation we were having here that you also are on another podcast.
Well, Overcast is the first podcast I was not necessarily on. I've been a guest on podcasts in the past for various reasons, mostly people that needed someone to shoot his mouth off. But it's the first podcast I host.
Okay.
So I have another podcast called Right Brain, where me and another writer get together and we talk about each of our individual progress in the publishing world. We talk about various books that we see on Inkshares, and then we try to give tips as much as our limited knowledge will allow on how to run a successful either a successful crowdfunding campaign for publishing or just general writing tips. So it's a bit more intellectual than the Overcast.
Right. Oh, Amy's gonna listen to this. So you're calling that podcast unintellectual.
No, I'm just saying that we talk. One of them we talk about video games. The other one we talk about books.
So it's more it's more nerdy than the other podcast.
Oh, absolutely. It's a different kind of nerdy, that's for sure.
Right. Well, that's cool. No, I'm a fan. I listen to it whenever you guys put out an episode to kind of fill that need for Overwatch.
Well, that's the only. You know the reason why we started doing that podcast, right? Is I've wanted to do a podcast for a long time because they're fun. It's a good way to get used to speaking into a microphone. It's a good way to get used to keeping a train of thought while talking to an audience, even if your audience is no one or an audience of few.
Right.
Although you probably have a larger audience here. And when Blizzard announced when they released the cinematic trailer for Overwatch, it basically checked every box of what I was looking for in a game. And it just spoke to me on a level that I couldn't shut up about it. I was nerding out on Facebook to my friends and to everyone that would listen and some people that wouldn't. And I said, I'm going to try to do a podcast about it. And when I said that, Amy Frost, who was also nerding out pretty hardcore about it, said, "Oh, if you're doing a podcast on Overwatch, I want to do a podcast on Overwatch." So I said, let's do a podcast on Overwatch together.
Well, that works. Now, were you at BlizzCon when it was announced?
No, I was not. But I was at work, pretending to work, but actually listening to what was going on at BlizzCon.
The live stream. Yeah. See, that's what I did this year because I didn't make it. But I was actually at BlizzCon 2014 when they announced Overwatch. And to be in that main hall when that video played, like it was like they just told everyone they were giving them $1 million. Like everyone was just like awestruck. Like they struck the right note with everybody. I think the only people that probably wouldn't like this game are like the bros that need to shoot people in Call of Duty. And even they might find some love for it.
They will, because they'll approach it from the
Soldier
more like
40,
technical.
whatever.
Exactly. There's
Right.
Soldier 76 for them to play.
But I played it twice. Now, Corey and Brandon, any listeners of Geek Access will know them as my hosts there. They played, along with Corey's brother Eric, they played Overwatch nonstop that whole weekend. I played it twice. Now, I only played it twice because after my second playthrough, I was like, if I play this game anymore, I'm going to have the most miserable 2 to 3 years of my life until this game comes out. So I pulled away. I sniffed the drugs, tasted them a little bit. I'm like, all right, I'm going.
Just put your pinky in the cocaine. Put a bit
now
on
we're
your tongue. Go, yeah, it's good stuff.
Now we're close. They're telling us March. We're like 3 months away. We're going to get back into, by the time the beta comes back to us, we're going to be like 2.5 months away from full release. So it's exciting.
Oh, man. Yeah, I can't wait.
And I assume not only from a player's side of it, but probably from a podcast host side of it too, you're excited because it'll provide more substance for your show.
Absolutely, and the whole point is to be able to talk about it. We want the greater community to grow so that we can, in a way, we can start bringing in some people that are in the community, some players. I'm the kind of guy who wants to get into sports because I like the idea of following teams and like cheering people on, but never could find anything to get excited about. But I am looking forward to Overwatch becoming an esport just so I can follow the teams and follow rankings and cheer on, like pick a favorite team and cheer those fuckers on. So
go fuckers, go.
Yeah, go. Like, God, can there be a team called the Fuckers? I don't care how bad they are. I'll cheer them on.
We'll call them the Fockers. It'll be the Meet the Parents team.
But that's like having the game be in full release. A, will give us more content, but B, will also give us access to people who are involved in different aspects of the game within the community that we can have on for interviews and like look at what they're doing.
Right.
Like I don't want to speak out of turn, but we are considering having a cosplayer that did some awesome stuff for Overwatch on the show. So we want to expand in that direction. So the show's constantly kind of evolving to adapt to what we know and what we have available to us regarding Overwatch.
Right.
But having a full release is obviously going to give us a lot of material.
Right. Oh, definitely, definitely, and obviously a lot more time to play the game too. I mean, that's the most important thing.
It's so good. See, one of the jokes that we did very early on in the show, because we started Overcast 6 months before the beta was out.
Right.
Like every time they would announce a character, every tidbit of information they would give us, we would analyze and dissect. Because we're not a news show. I find podcast news shows, unless you're doing something like a daily tech news show or something that's daily, you can't do news. It's impossible, because by the time our show would be recorded and out, any news has been out and read and digested for days.
Right.
So we do opinions, we do analysis, we do a lot of speculation. We talk about what we want to see in the game, what we think we'll see in the game. So we could do that before there was a beta very easily, as long as they were feeding us information here and there. But one of the jokes that we kept doing is like, what if we've been doing this for like 6 months and the game comes out and it's terrible?
I remember, I'm sure you mentioned that on more than one episode, but I do remember at least an episode where you mentioned that. And I was kind of laughing because, and I messaged Amy on Facebook the day after I heard that episode. I'm like, have you guys never played the game?
Well, Amy had played at PAX East.
Right.
She had played at PAX East, and she said, no, it's good. And look, I haven't played a Blizzard game. Like I can't even say I'm a video game player, because I don't play that many video games. I'm a Blizzard player.
Right.
I am completely in their ecosystem. And if you would tell me, oh, the rest of the video game industry has collapsed into a black hole, I would shrug and say, well,
Blizzard's
okay.
Right.
As long as there's still Blizzard. Maybe I've got blinders, but it's just, and I do play a few other video games, and there's some stuff I'm looking forward to. No Man's Sky, for one.
Oh, yes.
There's this thing called Zero Dawn Horizon that just looks insane because it has robot dinosaurs. And
dinosaurs.
I'm into robots a lot. So there are other things that appeal to me, but Blizzard, especially by adding so many different genres of games, has my attention, and they've got an aesthetic and they've got an attitude that is very much in sync with how I want to approach games. A lot of people like to say like, oh, I don't know what Blizzard's secret sauce is, and Blizzard's secret sauce is super easy to understand, and I don't get how other video gaming companies don't see it. Is whenever Blizzard tries to evaluate how to approach a feature, their first criteria is it fun? And everything else is secondary to that. And
Right.
if you build games, because they're games, to be fun, they tend to work more than when you build games to be balanced and precise and realistic. These are all secondary things, because the primary purpose of a game is to entertain. So,
Right. Definitely. And there's something to be said for, again, we joked around about Superman and Lost Vikings, but obviously that was before Blizzard was Blizzard. But, if you look at purely from the release of Warcraft, Humans and Orcs in 1994, up through all that point, I think they've only had one small blemish, which was the release of Diablo 3. But even that wasn't like a lot of these game companies like, oh, it's not done. Well, okay, this is our deadline. Push it out. We'll fix it post-release. Which I think is what's ruining a lot of people's faith in AAA companies. But Blizzard, they released the original launch of Diablo 3 with good intentions. And then they go, oh, well, shit. Okay, look, we're sorry. We'll fix it. We promise. And then Reaper of Souls came out, and it's godly. So,
but here's the thing, though. When Diablo 3 came out, I mean, there was a lot of things that did not work well, but how can I put this? Like, one of the biggest things about Diablo 3 was, the real money auction house. But someone had to try it.
Exactly. And there are certain things that you, like something like that can't be tested to the full extent in-house. You have to just release it out into the wild. And even if it was a feature that wasn't good in the sense of it didn't resonate with players well, it was still constructed well. It was still flawless.
That's the thing. And would you rather a company like Blizzard, who is comfortable pulling back a feature, changing and adapting it? I mean, they've shown, like, a lot of people talk about them fixing things. What they're really doing is iterating. They're not fixing something that is broken. They're just these are just new generations adapting to what the market wants, adapting to what the fans want. So they tried something. Someone somewhere had to try a real money auction house or a different way of monetizing. They didn't resonate with the people, with the customers, so they pulled it out. It's not a mistake. It's an attempt.
Right. And how many companies? Because I mean, if you look at it purely from a numbers game, the real money auction house was a means for Blizzard to make a little bit of money after the initial purchase on a game that didn't have a monthly fee. Mm-hmm. This was a game that was going to need constant patches, updates, etc. And this
Servers.
Exactly. And this was a way to do that. They just pulled the plug. They said, you know what? The revenue that we're getting from that, don't even worry about it. We don't need it, because what's more important is it's making the players unhappy. So we're just going to throw that money away and get rid of that feature because it's better for our players. And how many other AAA companies would do that?
Not very many.
And that's the great thing about Blizzard.
Exactly. And that's the thing. But here's where I kind of worry about the attitude of calling things like that mistakes, is that I don't want Blizzard to become the kind of company that is gun shy about trying new things. Because what makes Blizzard great and what makes Blizzard stand out is when they either readapt, like rework something that's already been done by another company, but do it better, but also when they innovate, when they try new things. But if they become scared of trying new things because they might be branded a mistake, then they're going to stop doing it, and we're going to lose a very important part of what makes Blizzard what they are.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, and not to carry on about Blizzard for so long, but
no, I'm fine with it.
Me too. I think Heroes of the Storm is proof that quote unquote mistake didn't scare Blizzard from doing that, because Heroes of the Storm is a prime example of, look, we're going to take a genre of game that essentially was built in our backyard, and we're going to flip it on its head. We're going to change the types of heroes. We're going to give you multiple different maps. We're going to make it so the kills aren't that big of a deal. It's more of an objectives game. We're basically taking the two most popular, or arguably the most popular PC games in the world, Dota and League of Legends, and we're going to make a MOBA, but we're not going to call it a MOBA. We're going to call it a hero brawler, and we're going to completely change how it's played. So I think that is Blizzard saying, we're still not afraid to innovate, and we're still not afraid to try something new.
Oh no, and I completely agree with that. And I'm not saying that they are becoming afraid. I just don't want them to
down the road
have reasons to become afraid.
Or maybe even now that they have the overarching umbrella of Activision, have Kotick going, all right, maybe you guys shouldn't do that. We do have a line here.
That's a very complex discussion for another time. Is that like the whole idea of how mergers and companies buying one another works? If there's something I've come to understand about the gaming community, whether it's miniature gaming or video gaming, is that the average person has no understanding of how any of this works.
Right. Yeah.
When they hear, oh, Activision bought Blizzard, they think they assume it's the same thing as if you and I go buy a chocolate bar to consume, and I now own this chocolate bar. I can eat it when I want, and I can keep it forever if I want. Like, that's not how it works. When a company buys a company, we're talking about contracts that are 500 pages long, and there's reacquisition conditions. These things are super complex. When Activision bought Blizzard, there's no, the people like you and me have no idea what the conditions of the purchase were.
Right.
But I can guarantee one thing: it's not just Activision can do whatever they want with Blizzard.
Right.
That is not the case.
Well, I was kidding, but way to shove it down my throat.
No.
I'm
not saying you don't know
right.
specifically
no.
you.
Well, no, I don't. No, I don't know, and I admit it. Well, no, I know. I'm just giving you shit. Calm down.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for bringing it down, Nate. Bye.
No, see you later, everybody. But no, and that's very true. I mean, I know, there was a lot of those memes going around, oh, the next World of Warcraft expansion pack is going to be World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, and they're going to bring assault rifles into World of Warcraft.
Oh, it has been assault rifles.
I was actually
for World of Warcraft for a long time.
When they announced that merger, I was really hoping that they were going to bring some World of Warcraft characters into Guitar Hero. I wanted to get up there on the stage as Thrall with or Elite Tauren Chieftain. Tell me that wouldn't have been a match made in heaven. Elite Tauren Chieftain in Guitar Hero.
I am Murloc.
I know, right? Well, I think they
Hero?
actually released that song on Guitar Hero 3.
But see, that's the thing. Like, I have a feeling, especially like considering it's Activision Blizzard, that when they do trade properties back and forth like that, it's going to be more in the tongue-in-cheek for fun thing. It's not going to be an exploitative thing.
No, I think it'd be cool to see. Well, I forget his name, but that like maybe see like a Call of Duty character in Heroes of the Storm. Like that would be interesting, or maybe even like a Call of Duty themed map in Heroes. Like that's something where, because Heroes of the Storm is already so tongue in cheek, and it's kind of it takes the lore of the characters, but kind of has fun with it. That's something that I know there'd be a lot of Blizzard purists that wouldn't want it, but that's something that I could see them doing where it wouldn't hurt the overarching product.
I would be one that would like to see. I would like to see the Blizzard sort of ecosystem stay closed, but I don't mind seeing things from that IP bleed out.
Right.
I just don't.
You don't want
feel
to
comfortable with
bleeding
things bleeding in.
It's like I want to see more Blizzard everywhere else, but I don't want to see anything else contaminating my Blizzard.
Yeah, well, even like I could understand people not wanting to say have Tracer appear in Call of Duty because that would be kind of weird.
Right.
But for things that are more generic, when you're talking about, let's say you're talking about Guitar Hero, having some of the music from Overwatch and from Blizzard games be in Guitar Hero,
right,
that appeals to me. That is a way of getting me to play Guitar Hero, and it doesn't spoil the thematic or the intellectual property of Guitar Hero. There's no characters in that. There's no story to pollute.
Very much true. Or maybe having like Thrall as a bonus skateboarder in the new Tony Hawk or something, because I believe Activision owns Neversoft as well.
Could be.
Yeah. But anyway, tangents, dude. Tangents. Maybe that's the name. That's the name of this episode. It's gonna be a 3-hour interview by the time we're done.
I did the Trivia Geek show, and my constant tangents and talking almost doubled the duration.
I'm
of the
on that
episode.
tomorrow night.
Oh, it's super fun, man.
That's what I hear.
Time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just don't let Carrie give you any shit.
Oh, I give her shit on Twitter already. So, but
great.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, I'll be on that tomorrow night. So that'll be cool. If you happen to be listening to this before tomorrow night, before Wednesday the 15th at 9 p.m., twitch.tv/Trivia Geeks, and I will be there. But so we've talked about the miniatures, we've talked about physical gaming, we've talked about digital gaming. Let's talk about really what it is that, at least in what you've presented to me, kind of what makes you you, and that's your writing. That's you being an author. So
or at least trying.
Well, right, but that's your passion. That's what you want to do. If you could pick what you make a living off of and what you do for a career, it would be being an author. I'm correct in that, correct?
You're 100% correct. It's one of those things that I will keep doing regardless of whether or not I get paid for it.
It's a passion. It's a love. It's a desire.
Exactly. It's a need.
It's a need.
When I first started, when I first started writing my first book, which was about 6 years ago, I was trying to do it because if you ask anybody like on the street, like what's like the top 10 things you want to do before you die, most people will say, oh, I'd like to write a book. Like everybody says they want to write a novel. So I wanted to knock that off my bucket list. And I started writing, and about 20,000 words into it, I went, oh, I'm never going to stop doing this. This is just the best. It's the most fun thing I've ever done. So might as well try to make it a career. I
would imagine it must be a wonderful way. And I've never written anything out of school, aside from show notes. But I mean, I remember writing in school and writing stories. And I remember I wrote this one murder mystery thing where there was an overarching killer and he murdered everybody in the house. And everybody in the house were people from my classroom, so my teacher got really worried about me.
Well, you write what you know.
Right, exactly. But I
know my classmates, and I know murder.
But I would assume that writing is a great outlet. Like if you're frustrated or you're happy or you're angry or there's something bugging you, like that, those emotions can be released through your writing.
It's I guess so. I'm not a very expressive writer in the sense that like I don't write down my emotions. I don't sit down and say, oh man, I'm really depressed, I'm gonna write a depressing story. I kind of wish I was, because I assume that would probably give a lot of weight to what I do. But this is why I kind of gravitate towards science fiction, because I love thinking about like the future and technology and science, and just like I quickly get bored about what is possible right now, and I like to think what's going to be possible tomorrow or in 10 years. So that's science fiction. But science fiction doesn't necessitate me to like delve deep into my own emotions and all that. I still can write something that's a bit poignant, but I don't need to. What I do find from writing is that it allows me such a powerful detachment from the world while I'm doing it, that it combines the relaxation I get from painting miniatures, but it allows me to have this creativity that I don't necessarily find doing something as technical as painting miniatures.
Sorry, mind blank. I was listening.
No problem.
I was listening and I was absorbing, and it's funny because as you're talking, and I'm listening, I'm kind of going over what I have written to ask you about your writing, and I'm like, you're just covering my questions without me asking. But that's all good. It's all good. Sorry.
Oh, look, I will never lack things to talk about, especially if you get me talking about like science fiction and writing and all that. The process. I've done almost 10 shows on just writing with my other co-host Paul Inman. So
nice.
I don't get sick of talking about these things.
So what is it about now? I don't label myself as a science fiction fan, for the most part, which I've had actually some people in the Tadpool give me a little bit of crap about. They're like, you've been talking about Star Wars for 6 months. And like, I'll argue to the end of the time that Star Wars is fantasy because it's sword fighting with magical powers.
Oh yeah, well, I got into this really dumb argument with someone on Facebook because I described Star Wars as science fiction with space wizards, as they're not wizards, they're monks. Like, really? Is this a conversation worth having?
But what is it?
They dress like monks, sure.
Well, yeah. Well, they dress like hooded introverts.
Yeah, sure.
So, as somebody who is passionate about science fiction and obviously enough to write about it, like what are some of the draws? You talked about how it not only does science fiction show where we could be in 5, 10, 20 years, is it kind of just like is it like a fascination? Like, because I think because it's something that's in the future for the most part, not all science fiction's in the future, but it's just it's a way for us to express our imaginations almost to the fullest, because we're not so much restricted to rules that have already been formed either in present time or the past.
Yeah, well, what's great about science fiction is that there's kind of like degrees of science fiction. You can argue that Star Wars is fantasy, but it is science fiction fantasy. There's still robots. There's still some technology. It's just that a lot of it is driven by, it's not explained as hard science fiction. It's
right.
not. No one takes the time to explain to you how the hyperspace works. It's a lot of hand waving, and you can replace a lot of the technology by magic, but it's still got the feel of science fiction.
Right. In space, you have spaceships.
In space, with spaceships, and you robots and droids and stuff like that, and holograms. So it's got a lot of the tropes of science fiction, but it's not science fiction that relies on the science, say, at the same degree as a Star Trek does, or a 2001: Space Odyssey,
right,
which are harder sci-fi. So that's what's fun also about science fiction, is that it gives you a really wide gamut to paint with when you decide how hardcore you want to be. And there's probably some people who are going to argue, no, real science fiction is really solid things like Arthur C. Clarke or The Martian by Andy Weir. It has to be as realistic as possible. But even Andy Weir, like he says, there's hand waving. There are no sandstorms that powerful enough to blow a guy off his feet on Mars ever, because the atmosphere is way too thin. But knowing as he was writing the book, he knew that, and he said, well, I'm still going to put a sandstorm because that's what I need for my story.
Right.
And that part is, quote unquote, fantasy. So it's all degrees.
Right. So So we'll talk a little bit about the book you have coming out in March. Life Engineered. So telling us as much as you can. I know you probably don't want to talk about it too much, but whereabouts does that book fall on that kind of science fiction scale?
The way I approached first of all, the first
or rephrase that question in your mind however you want. Like
the way I avoid having to deal with too much hard sci-fi things is by setting the book a little over 1,400 years in the future.
Okay.
So we're talking about a level of technology that is so advanced that a lot of stuff that can seem that a lot of people can say, that's impossible. I can say that's impossible today, but probably possible in 1,500 years. So, but at the same time, a lot of the technology that I apply in the book is based on ideas and theories that we have today, just pushed to a certain limit. Basically, some people say, well, we can't do this thing. Like one of the technologies that I use is something called an Alcubierre drive. It's warp drive, if you will, but with an actual scientific explanation behind it. The reason why we can't do it today is because the energy requirements are absolutely insane, just impossible to do. Except in 1,500 years, maybe we've refined the calculations. Maybe we've found alternate means of getting that power sources. So in 1,500 years, having this kind of warp drive, if you will, might be possible. Henceforth, I have it in my book. So it's based. A lot of things are based on actual technologies that exist or could at least exist, or have been hinted as being theoretically possible, if not actually possible quite yet.
Cool. Can you tell us a little bit about the book, as far as like a minor plot summary, or maybe describe a character for us? Or
Oh, absolutely. Here, I'm going to spoil chapter 1 1/4, if you will.
Okay.
Because it's kind of the conceit. So, and it's one of the cool technologies in the book, and it's not a spoiler as is. So the first chapter is actually set on Earth here today, except it's revealed at the end of the chapter is kind of a simulation. The main character is introduced, and things happen in the chapter that I won't say because I don't want to spoil that, because it's kind of fun. But what happens is that it's revealed at the beginning of the second chapter that the main characters, the entire cast of characters, the robots, because every character in my story are robots, their personalities are actually distilled from, think of it a Matrix-like artificial environment where you get to live a life and then you die and then you live another life, but there's always this core personality behind every one of the lives that you live.
Okay.
Until eventually you've gone through so many of these cycles that you're sort of deemed worthy. You've reached nirvana, if you will. You understand enough about how your own personality or soul works that the AI, the machine that controls this artificial environment, spots this quality in you, takes your personality and says, okay, well, let's get together and build you a body. What do you want to do? You have eternity in front of you. There's no limits to what you can do. What are your passions? What do you like? What do you want to do? And we'll build you a custom body that does that. And the main character is described. Her last cycle, if you will, is described in the first chapter, and the second chapter is where she starts her life as a robot. But there's something, quote unquote, wrong, where there's too much of her previous personality left. And that kind of dictates how she approaches learning about the universe, learning about these other robots and some of the events that are going on.
Interesting. You've very much gotten me to want to read this. This sounds entertaining and
excellent.
What I like is I'm thinking in my mind as you're explaining this to me, and you've explained to me why your book is titled what it is in just that short little 2.5. Like, it's quite literally a life that has been engineered.
That's where I got the name.
Right. So I like that, and it's very intriguing. And I'm excited for March 1st. That is
cool.
That is the release date, right? March 1st.
March 1st is the release date. I'm getting super nervous because now I need to sort of organize some kind of launch party, but I don't know how to do those things. So there's a lot. Like it's weird because I work in marketing and graphic design, and I'm super good at promoting other people. When it comes to promoting my own things, I don't know what to do most of the time. It's so weird.
Are you not arrogant enough to promote yourself?
Terrible at it. You give me a cool product that is not mine, because I guess that's the problem. Like I can sell something I believe in. I'm a nerd artist, so I don't believe in myself, so I have trouble selling myself.
Right.
But give me something cool to promote, and I will just promote the shit out of it.
Right. Now with this book, I didn't have this written in the show notes, but as we talk about, I'm remembering. I think I'm remembering correctly. You had won something. Was it on Sword and Laser that you had won something?
Right. So the Sword and Laser, the podcast, Tom Belmont, Tom Merritt and Veronica Belmont.
Tom Belmont.
Yeah, I'm sure that's gonna fly.
I'm gonna sound cap that and send it to him.
Please don't. I'm actually getting along with Tom at this point. I would like to not sabotage that. No, it's the Veronica Belmont and Tom Merritt and their podcast, Sword and Laser, got into a they did this thing with Inkshares, which is it's called crowdfunding, but it's way more crowd voting, where people vote on which books they want to see published with pre-orders. And they did this contest where the top 5 during a period of time, pre-orders for fantasy and science fiction, the top 5 books would get published no matter how many pre-orders they have. And then Tom and Veronica would pick one of those books to be the first book in the Sword and Laser collection. And I got into the top 5, which they turned into a top 6 because of things. And then they picked, instead of picking one book, they picked 2 books because they're Sword and Laser. So they picked A Sword, which was Asteroid Made of Dragons, which is like the best title ever. And they picked my book as the science fiction book.
That's awesome.
It's so weird I've been listening to Sword and Laser for 2 or 3 years, and having people that you listen to and, let's face it, admire and enjoy their work, and getting a link to a video where Veronica Belmont basically says, we've picked your book. We've picked The Life Engineered by J.F.Dubeau to be part of the Sword and Laser collection. I needed like 15 minutes to cool down after that.
I bet.
Just shocking. Just so happy. And it's ever since then, it's been just an awesome ride. Everything else in my life is just completely falling apart, but this is going super well.
Right. Well, that's awesome. And I remember, because back then at that point in time, I don't think we ever talked much. I think I had played Cards Against Humanity with you maybe once or twice. And I remember hearing that. I think it was announced on the morning stream as well, or maybe it was announced on DTNS, or
probably maybe on DTNS. I don't think they've mentioned it on morning stream.
It might have been mentioned on one of the episodes Tom was on.
Maybe maybe I'm wrong. I don't remember it being announced.
But either way, but I remember hearing it. I'm like, hey, I know that guy. So I know a Frog Pants celebrity of sorts, somebody who's famous now in the tadpool.
I hope I am not a celebrity. I don't wanna. This is the weird thing. Like, ever since I've gone into the whole writing thing, I've learned what's expected of writers once they become professional. And the bizarre thing is, I have some other writer friends who, I really want to be a writer, and I really want, like, I'm looking forward to this and this and this. And a lot of these things I hear about, it's like, I really could do without these things. Like, one of my friends told me, you'll be expected to do readings if you're a professional author. Like, what do you mean by readings? You mean you go to, like, say, a bookstore and fans show up and you read your book to them? Like, no.
I am never doing that.
That sounds like the worst thing ever.
Right.
You want me to read things I wrote in front of a crowd? Yeah, but people like it. I don't like
That's like doing a live podcast episode. Ain't gonna happen.
I could do a live podcast because this is just talking off the top of my head.
No,
it's not exposing something that I've worked on. I know it's stupid, and if I am asked to do it, I will do it. But I have trouble wrapping my mind around the idea that some people that's what they look forward to. That is what they want.
So let me ask you this, because I have something I can kind of relate this to a little bit, but I want to make sure it's on the same level. Would you have an easy time getting up in front of a crowd and reading something that somebody else wrote?
Absolutely no problem.
Right. See, so where I have that with vocals, with music, I can get up and do karaoke, no problem. You get me up on a stage and do something I wrote, and I'm like, well, let's do his song. It's just because with writing music, similar to writing books, it's it's what you created. It's whether it's from emotions you are feeling or whether it's a story that you created, and you're kind of exposing yourself on stage.
Exactly. There's a level of vulnerability that is kind of it's a bit too raw. Like I did improv for 2 years, and put me on a stage to just shoot the shit and just say random things and try to get people to laugh at me. No problem. I can get people to laugh with me, laugh at me. That is not an issue. But have them understand and embark on a journey of a story that I created. Whew, that becomes a bit heavier.
That's a little heavy-handed.
Exactly. It's because there's no escape to it. Like, let's say I'm reading a book someone else wrote and someone says, oh, that sucks. Well, maybe like I didn't express the author's work correctly. I can take that blame. Or if someone else is reading my book and people say that sucked, well, maybe there wasn't the synergy of the proper person reading the book. But I'm reading my own book. If it sucks, it's all on me, and that's hard.
Right. It's funny when you phrase it that way. And this isn't a long tangent, I promise, but I was watching an episode of Seinfeld last night. And it was an episode, it was early in the show, and it was an episode where a girl broke up with him. And he goes, "But why?" And she goes, "Well, I saw your act." And he goes, "But that was a bad crowd. Don't base it off that." She goes, "Jerry, I heard the material." Like it was like, so it's the thing is like, oh well, that sucked, but no, the book doesn't suck. The person reading my book sucked. Don't blame my book.
Exactly. And the worst part is most of my book is written from first person perspective of a girl. Like it's a woman that's living the story, and everything's written from her point of view.
Right.
So coming out of me, that's gonna sound so stupid.
It's like, it's bad enough I had to write this from a perspective of a girl. They have to read it from a perspective of a girl too.
Well, the weird thing is I didn't plan it that way. It just kind of happened.
Right.
So, Hey. It's so bizarre. Like, one of the things about the book that I don't mind spoiling because it's kind of more of an overarching theme is that the whole book is just stuffed with allegories about motherhood of all things. Like, I don't have kids. I don't want kids. I don't know how that injected itself into the storyline, but it's there and it works. So
right,
go with it.
Exactly. So along with The Life Engineered, you also have another book that is. Have you started writing it?
I am completely done. I'm actually halfway done with the sequel.
Oh, awesome. So,
I'm halfway done with 2 sequels. Both. I have a sequel for Life Engineered that I'm going to start funding probably in April, and I have I'm halfway done with the sequel of that other book that's not even getting published yet. So
right. So this book,
like writing.
So this book you're in the process of trying to fund, and it's called The God in the Shed. And when we kind of spoke, you said the way you described this to me was Stand By Me, Call of Cthulhu, and Harry Potter. And that seems like a very intriguing combination.
In a way, it's such an easier book to describe because it's so much more, a lot more familiar themes than The Life Engineered. And it's so much fun to write. One of the reasons I want this book to publish is not even about selling it. I don't even care if people don't read it. I just want the opportunity to work with an editor, which is a surprisingly fun process. I thought it would be soul crushing and ego destroying, but working with the right editor is super fun. And I want that book to get the benefits of going through that editorial process because I think it deserves it.
Nice. So that book, fantasy horror, is the genre you put that in.
It's the way it is. It's kind of modern fantasy. I can. Do you mind if I give a bit of a description of the book?
By all means, the stage is yours.
So the book is set in the eastern townships of Quebec because write what you know, and I know that area. And it could be really in any small, tiny rural village. It doesn't matter. And the story basically centers around I would say, you have an older generations, like the main character's grandparents, if you will, found this old god, like very Cthulhu level creature in the woods near the village. And through stupidity, because they were young, they kind of made the god a bit on the angry side. Then the next generation after tried to exploit the power of that god by doing things that made it even angrier. And that didn't work. But they managed to sort of bind it, if you will, make sure that it wouldn't go on a killing spree. And then that third generation, these last characters, the main characters, if you will, they're the generation that are stuck having to deal with what's been done. Like there's the god that was bound for so many years finds a way to get loose and gets retrapped in the main character's backyard shed through completely just complete luck, and inadvertently it's stuck there because of it's explained in the book, some magical bullshit. But it's going to break out again. Like there's a timer on how long it is, and they have to sort of figure it out, go backtrack up the generations and figure out all these secrets to how to not have it get loose and absolutely murder everyone. So I say the main characters are the younger, but there's actually main characters from every generation. It's all like this tiny little village with all these secrets, and everybody's trying. Like you still got people who want to exploit that god to get power. Meanwhile, there's other people who say, no, let's just shut up and not talk about it. So there's a lot of intrigue going on. And the most of it is more fantasy because you discover these kind of layer of how people know magic, but very, very little of it. As in, it's like most of the magic in the book is mostly people doing really dumb things or doing things that they don't understand. But the horror is very, I would say, it's very rare in the book. But when it's there, it's very stark. It's not something like every page of someone getting killed, but when someone gets killed, it's fairly gruesome.
It's a nicely described murder.
It is either that or it's a murder scene that shit happened there.
Right. And
one of the things I love writing about this is that I've built this really cool magic system that kind of explains why magic exists in our world and how come people don't use it too much, and when they do use it, how come it doesn't get noticed. Like, why isn't everybody a goddamn wizard if there's magic? Well, because magic has these consequences, and there are people that do use it, but most of them don't know what they're doing.
I'm just gonna sound clip your quote of why isn't everybody a goddamn wizard?
Well, it's like when I say like there's a hint of Harry Potter in my book, that's one of the things that kind of bothers. Like, I love Harry Potter. I think it's wonderful and it's whimsical. Emphasis whimsical, because if you try to apply too much logic to a story like Harry Potter, you have to ask yourself the question: if there's wizards, why isn't everybody a goddamn wizard or using wizardry for things? There's so many problems in the world that I would say like first grade of potion making at Hogwarts could solve a lot of world problems, and they're not doing it. So what are they, evil?
But don't you remember when they explained that in the first book? Because Harry asked that question. And he said that he goes, why don't wizards fix all these problems? And he goes, because we can't have the muggles coming to us to solve all their problems. That's why we have to remain a secret.
Which is a super bullshit answer, because clearly...
Essentially, the wizards are the rich people of the world, and they don't want to solve all the poor people's problems.
But it's super bullshit, because, and actually it's a very good analogy, because the rich people are still rich because they have poor people working for them. The same way the goddamn wizards are still part of, like, they still use the moral realm.
Right.
They still go get people from there. It's like, oh, well, like, we don't want to help the muggles with their problem, but we'll have them babysit Harry for like 15 years. It's not like we couldn't just take care of that ourselves. Let's have some fat dude.
Well, they even explained that
ruin his-
because they didn't want the fame to ruin his life. Come on, JF.
No, it's let's not have the fame ruin his life. Let's ruin it, from the get-go by having him live under stairs.
Right. I am excited because all 6 of those books just got released on Audible. So as opposed to having to buy them off Pottermore for like $200, because I do audiobooks because it's easier for me at work.
Right.
So as opposed to buying the whole collection for like $250 off like Pottermore, I can just use my Audible credits.
Which makes a lot more sense.
Indeed.
Yeah, I'm working.
That's why I was able to pull those references from book 1 because I finished book 1 very recently.
I thought, oh my God, he's a Potterhead. This is gonna be tough.
No, I am not a pothead.
I said Potterhead. Okay, fine.
I know, but it's just
no.
It's
But
funny.
what I'm saying, like, it's fine that like you don't need in a fantasy story, you don't need everything to make sense. But like a lot, like I was explaining, the degrees of science fiction where you have certain levels of realism, the same thing kind of applies also for fantasy. Like you have high fantasy and low fantasy tends to try to be more realistic. And the level of fantasy in A God in the Shed is more low fantasy. There's no one uses wands. There's like one of the levels of magic is kind of more like reality hacking. It's basically using tricks that should not work, but they're always the same recipe and they always do the same thing. And that thing is completely illogical, but it's just the way the quote unquote world is coded.
Very interesting. And that's, again, you've described this book to me, and I want to read it. Like, it just sounds exciting.
Good. Yes.
So
Excellent.
you're good at that. And it's funny because you just got done saying a little while ago that you can't promote yourself.
Well, that's the thing. Like, give me an audience to which I get to talk about my book, and I can probably do a good job convincing that audience to at least give it a try. But finding the audience, going to people, like going in front of a crowd and saying, listen, I want to talk about my book. I expect 100% of that crowd going, no, and walking out. And that's why I don't do that.
Right.
And finding new crowds. Like whenever, like on the Facebook Frog Pants community, whenever I would put up a post saying, hey, go check out my book, I always feel like an idiot when I do that.
Right. Even the same thing with like promoting podcasts. I try and not do it too much because that is Scott's realm. They're there because they're a fan of Scott's podcast, and I know they don't mind it as long as we don't spam it. But it feels that's like going to another band's show and trying to sell your CDs. Like it just seems, I don't know. It seems a little off sometimes. Most of the community is very receptive of it, but.
Yeah, and to be honest, there's a difference though between promoting a podcast, promoting a book. Like Scott doesn't write fantasy science fiction books, so I don't feel that uncomfortable.
No, but Tom does.
The reason I feel uncomfortable promoting is because I don't like promoting stuff in general. But like I don't think we've ever, Amy and I has ever promoted Overcast on there because that is totally in his backyard. Like what Scott does is video game podcast. He does a lot of that, and like there's no question in my mind at some point he's gonna say, I'm gonna start an Overwatch podcast. It's probably gonna be called the Overwatch Show, and it's like episode 1 of the Overwatch Show is gonna have 10,000 more listeners than we will ever have, and it doesn't matter. But at the same time, like to start promoting my show on his community, that feels a bit weird. So I understand where you're coming from.
Right. Well, I became a little bit more comfortable with it once they formed like the Tadpool Podcasters group. Obviously, they're like, look, if you do a show, talk about it. We're all podcast fans. But on that same level, and not to kind of, again, tangents, not to kind of go off on that, but I became a little bit more comfortable with, one, I am never going to do anything that affects his revenue. I'm not that popular and I'm not that good. But 2, when he came out with Core, after Garrett had already established Into the Nexus, and Garrett is very much a part of Frog Pants, like that told me that Scott isn't really afraid to step on other Frog Pants toes. Do you know what I mean?
Oh no, and we were talking about that in the pre-show. I mean, to him, it's a business. If he notices that there's enough, because I mean, you can look at it from another point of view, and I don't want to turn this discussion into an analysis of frog pants.
Oh, no, not at all.
Because that's a completely different discussion. But I mean, a while ago, I listened to the instance, and one of the things that had been done is like the instance was supposed to become a generic Blizzard show that would talk about all things Blizzard. And at this rate, he's going to have a show about everything from Blizzard except WoW, and the instance is going to revert to a WoW show because he'll be talking about the other games on all of the other shows anyways.
Right.
So yeah, but the reason why there's a show called Core is because he wanted to do a show with the buddies he made playing Heroes of the Storm, which is normal. Like so many times, like I just have good conversations, like conversations with you. And man, it would be cool to have a show with him.
We should do a Cards Against Humanity podcast.
Oh, geez. I have no time. I wish maybe once I don't have a full-time job. But the other thing is, Heroes of Storm is super hot right now, and he does video game podcasts. He'd be crazy not to have that as a potential either promotional or revenue stream.
Right.
So of course there's going to be a Core show, and this spring there's going to be an Overwatch show from Frog Pants because there's going to be a huge freaking ton of people, and it will be stepping on Patrick Beja's toes because he's trying to do one, and on
right.
I guess
and Garrett's again, yeah,
Garrett's toes again. But I mean, like whenever he does a show, he automatically has a critical mass of listeners, which means he can immediately draw in some sponsors, and that's revenue. He'd be crazy not to do it.
Right, definitely. And I think he also helps bring an audience to those other shows too, because I mean, I listen to multiple. I don't listen to just the instance. When I'm playing WoW, I listen to multiple WoW podcasts. I listen to multiple. You know, I listen to Garrett and Patrick's show, but I also listen to yours and Amy's show because you get a different perspective. You know, I don't go to one website for my news. I don't listen to one radio station for my music. You know, and having those different perspectives, it brings everything around. It brings it all full circle.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that
it'd be like reading books from only one author.
Exactly. Know? And I mean, as long as that author is me, I have no problem with that. But of
course not.
No, but you're absolutely right. And the thing is, it doesn't necessarily, the fact that he started the Core doesn't mean it's taking away listeners from Into the Nexus.
No, it's a very different type of show.
Exactly. And the thing is, there's this illusion that people have about competition that it's always an or situation. It's this or that. When a lot of time the competition, especially in non-saturated markets, which podcasting still is, it becomes an and situation. It's this and that.
Right. Yeah, I get that a lot. Kind of going back full circle to Blizzard stuff. I have a lot of friends that play other MMOs. I have a lot of friends that play other ARPGs. I have friends that play League of Legends that won't touch Heroes of the Storm, stuff like that. I play Diablo 3, and I also play Path of Exile. Path of Exile is, a lot of people consider it the true Diablo 2 sequel because it plays a lot more like Diablo 2 than Diablo 3 does. It's a great ARPG, and I have friends who play that who are like, well, why do you even bother with Diablo? Why don't you just play this? I'm like, why can't I play both? Why does it have to be one perspective?
And you see that in the movies too, which is one of the things I find kind of funny is how a lot of people see the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe versus DC Cinematic Universe as if there can be only one. And that makes me laugh because I work in marketing, and I completely understand that for the studios, when Avengers does super well, Warner Brothers claps like very, very happy children because that means the genre is still healthy.
Right, and they can make money off of it.
Absolutely. I mean, if Avengers does super well, that means that Superman versus Batman has a better chance of doing well. If let's say like you're Warner Brothers, you invested $250 million into this movie. You've got all this promotional machine going, and movie after movie from the Marvel Cinematic Universe start bombing. What does that say to you? Does it say, oh, we're going to sell a bunch of tickets because like people are choosing DC? No, it means the genre is dying and your movie is going to flop.
Right.
They
Right.
want the genre to be as healthy as possible, because people who really enjoy superheroes, they're going to buy more. They're going to go see several movies. They're not just going to pick one out of the year to go see. It's not or, it's and.
Right. It's the same reason we're getting the theatrical debut of the new Star Trek trailer at Star Wars.
Because it's the same. Because it's demographics.
Right. But
Like,
but that's another one of those. You talk about the this or this. Marvel or DC. For a long time, it's very similarly been Star Wars or Star Trek. It's always been. It's like Coke or Pepsi.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that. But I mean, I think the biggest reason that the trailer is being, because they're both part of J.J. Abrams' umbrella.
Yes. And can we agree that guy has won the nerd lottery?
As a
creator,
right?
It's insane.
Right. It's I mean, let's talk about it a little bit. We're what?
Sure.
4 days from Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Are you excited?
I'm very excited, but I still have not decided when I'm going to go see it, because I'm very busy, but I think I'm probably going to go see it like on the 20th.
Yeah. See, I'm going to have a hard time, because most of my friends, with the exception of one, are waiting until at least after opening weekend because they don't want to deal with the crowds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going the very first showing, the very first day. So I'm going to be like, and like my wife isn't even able to go with me because there's no babysitter for the kids. So she's going to stay home. I get to go see Star Wars.
Oh.
So I'm not going to be able to talk about it with anybody. And I'm going to be like, even, James in the Tadpool was like, all right, no talking about Star Wars till after the new year. I'm like, who the hell am I going to talk to about it? But I'm still excited. I'm still excited. But are you holding any reservation? Like, are you trying to wean back that hype train a little bit? Or are you just balls to the wall? It's Star Wars. We're going.
Well, that's the thing. Like, first of all, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I've like even when the prequels, before we knew they weren't as good as we wanted them to be, when like I went to all 3 premieres with like wearing Jedi robes and with a fake lightsaber and all that stuff. Like, I was way bigger into Star Wars back then than I am now. But I'm still a huge Star Wars fan. But I'm also like, I don't tend to try to be too black and white about things, and also I don't attach myself to weird hangups. Like, a lot of people are they're super optimistic because practical effects, which is nice, and I agree that prequels had too many CGI effects, but at the same time, when people complain about Return of the Jedi, it's because they think there's too many Muppets. Well, I'm sorry to break it to you guys, but Muppets are practical effects. So how about you all decide what you want, and once you've figured it out, you can start bitching about things. So I don't. What I think is going to be cool about these movies isn't how they made it. It isn't whether or not they stuck to the extended universe. What really gets me excited is the fact that we just don't know. And as far as the special effects are concerned, from what I can see on screen, it's not that they went full digital or they went full practical. Is that they balanced it, and they went basically what JJ probably asked himself is, what looks good,
right?
And went with that. Like not, oh, how can I kiss the fans' ass by putting all the practical effects, or how much can I play with computers and put all the CGI? He says, well, what looks good? What works here?
It's a very nice, harmonious marriage of the two technologies.
And here's the thing that's going to sound weird, and this is going to maybe piss off a few people. So for those of us, for those that are old enough to remember when Star Wars came out in 1977,
for the record, I'm not.
Sorry?
I said for the record, I'm not.
Yeah, no, there's not, like, anyways. There's probably not many of your listeners, but here's the thing: like, when that movie came out, one of the things that was super excellent is that the George Lucas and his gang at Industrial Light and Magic pushed the boundaries of what was possible with special effects. They pulled out all the stops, and the whole thing, like with Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, and Empire Strikes Back, what made those movies stand out so clearly wasn't just like the story and all that. It was the fact that they were doing things with special effects that had never been attempted to before. when Phantom Menace came out, doing full CGI environments was the equivalent of doing what he did with Star Wars in 1977 with current technology. He was pushing what had been done. He was doing what had never been done before with the current technology. Basically, he was doing his same MO. It's just instead of people being in awe, it annoyed them because it wasn't what was done in 1977.
Right.
So, and I think what we're seeing from J.J. Abrams is actually the maturation of that. It's basically he's taking all of the technology, whether it's practical or CGI, and he's pushing all of that to the limit and, layering a lens flare on it.
If you weren't going to make a lens flare comment, I was.
It's inevitable.
I love how there's a giant one in the main poster.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just in the trailer, like there's this big red one. Like, in one of the scenes.
Do you have any theories?
Do I? Actually, I put one on Facebook a few days ago. I have a feeling, and people are already telling me I'm wrong. And you know what? Whenever I make predictions like that, my biggest wish is to be wrong because I like to be surprised, but I also like to try to predict things. So here's my theory.
All right.
So my theory is that Kylo Ren and Rey are actually the two solo kids. And one of them got trained in the ways of the Force by Luke, which is Kylo Ren. But Luke wasn't able to sway him away from the dark side. And when Kylo Ren is looking at what I assume is his grandfather's mask, saying, "I will finish what you've begun," it's you have to ask yourself, what did Darth Vader begin that he never finished? Eradicating the Jedi. So
turning Luke to the dark side.
Maybe that's even better. So that's better. You've improved my theory. So he's looking to basically find Luke. My theory was finding Luke to kill Luke, but finding Luke to turn him to the dark side is even better. So
you're welcome.
You have one of those kids, and the second kid, Rey, like the Han and Leia, they hid her. Luke disappeared in shame. It's like, oh shit, I made the Sith again, and just went into hiding. Like I don't like the theory like that some people say he's so powerful with the Force that he has to isolate himself. And it sounds super stupid.
Well, that is kind of what Yoda did.
No, that's not what Yoda did. Yoda said, "Oh, they're hunting Jedi. I'm a super Jedi.
I should hide.
I should probably go hide somewhere." Now, since I'm strong with the Force, I'm going to go to Dagobah because there's life everywhere there, and that will sort of cloak me.
Oh, that makes sense.
I've always figured that was why he was on Dagobah, because absolutely every fucking thing is alive on Dagobah.
Right.
So, I'm going to go to Dagobah. There's no technology. I'm just going to live in a hut. I'm going to wait for, Jedis to come to me. But it's not like he was so powerful that everything, was exploding around him or some shit. Like, the whole point of being a powerful Jedi is mastering the Force. If you're powerful with the Force, you control it more, not less. It's like being a great jet pilot. Like when you're really good at piloting a jet, really powerful with the jets. It's not because you're shooting the missiles of the jet without thinking about
They're going
it. And
up
it just
everywhere.
happens. It's because you can do things that are super precise,
right.
Fly under the radar. It's because you're good at it.
Right.
That's what being good at things is.
Right.
So,
thank you for clearing that up.
That's why. Yeah, I don't think that's a good theory. So I think he went into hiding because he went, oh shit, there's a Sith. I made a Sith, and now Luke and Leia are kind of mad at me, and that Sith wants to kill me or turn me to the dark side. I'm going to take my robot and go hide. That's what he did. And meanwhile, Luke and Leia on hand, they said, well, we've got this other daughter, and there's the evil dude. We're gonna hide her so that he doesn't come and try to train her to the dark side. And that's why they look like they're always so sad. I think the story takes up at the point where Kylo Ren actually that's the whole point, where he's attacking that desert planet, where he's attacking Jakku, because oh shit, I just found my sister. It's go time.
Right.
So that's my theory, and I hope I'm wrong.
I like that. I actually think you're probably more right than some other theories that I've heard, or perhaps even my own.
What's your theory?
See, so I have what I want to happen, and then I have what I think is more likely to happen.
Let's talk about both.
So what I think is more likely to happen is probably something in the realm of what you mentioned. I think that Disney abolished the extended universe because they kind of liked it a little bit. They liked a little bit of the theories, but they wanted to make it their own.
Yeah, makes sense. They're artists, they're creators. They want to make things.
Right. Are you familiar with the EU at all?
A bit.
Okay.
I'm familiar with some bits of it. Some of it I like, some of it I don't. I tend to I understand that people are really attached to things like Admiral Thrawn and all that, but I can also understand that you don't necessarily want to have who jibs in your sequels.
Fair enough.
You know.
Right. No, I know. So I think that Kylo and Rey are essentially Jason and Jaina. And again, well, that's my more rational one. And I think something very similar to yours. My thought is that Luke trained Kylo. He failed. Kylo became obsessed with his grandfather, and everything else is history. And I think that is probably the more rational one.
There is one thing I insert into my theory.
Sure.
Is Finn. Finn is the unpredictable element that Kylo Ren, no one thought, is that he is clearly strong with the Force and happens to be there, and that's what fucks up his plans.
I read a fun little fan theory that Finn is the offshoot child of Leia and Lando.
Oh yeah, because he's black, and people think that there's only one black character in Star Wars, so obviously.
But it could also be because that they added Han's ex-wife in the comic books, which are canon, and his ex-wife is black. So it could be that
she probably knows Lando.
It could be that Finn is their kid. I'm just being funny.
Yeah, but there's a lot of family relationships in Star Wars, but I really hope that's not it. I really hope that there's not only one genetic line of black people in the Star Wars universe, because that would be.
They added her in there for a reason. Actually, and I don't think she's technically black. Isn't she like a cat person?
Yes, I don't know.
Anyway,
I saw one image once.
So that's the more realistic one. It's somewhat in line with yours. I wouldn't be surprised if some version of that is what actually happens in 4 days. The one I would love to see is Luke has actually gone dark, and he is the master behind the Knights of Ren, and Kylo is actually the apprentice, because when JJ came out and said, "Look, he's not really a Sith." Well, he's not really a Sith because he's an apprentice. You don't become a Sith until you become a master. So that's why he's not really a Sith, because he's just an apprentice. And I think Kylo is the apprentice of Luke, and I think Luke is the master. He's the master dark Sith. I think that for two reasons. One, we haven't seen Luke yet, and my only rational thought for that is because seeing him would visually be a spoiler. And if we saw him and he was on the dark side, that would be a visual spoiler. My other theory for that is because back in 2005, before any of this was even a thought, there was an interview where they sat down. I believe it was a Kevin Smith talk show, and Luke, Mark Hamill, and J.J. Abrams were sitting down, and Luke was like, "Oh yeah, I always wanted Luke to go dark, but George said no." And Abrams was just kind of nodding and he acknowledged that, yeah, that would be a pretty cool idea.
But hasn't that been already done in comics or novels or something?
Another reason why hasn't Han and Leia having a boy and girl already been done in the comics, and one of them going to the dark side? Hasn't that already been done in the EU?
Yeah, I don't know.
It could just be that the Skywalker bloodline's fucked.
Yeah, but here's why I don't like that particular storyline. It's because it makes Return of the Jedi meaningless. It basically takes the combination, the very
you mean the Muppet movie,
story.
Right?
Sorry,
the Muppet movie, right?
Yeah, the Muppet movie, the one with the cannibalistic Ewoks. But here's the thing. The climax of that movie is Luke. He's about to kill his father, fall to the dark side, and he goes, "No, I refuse the fucking dark side. I am a Jedi Knight like my father. And with that sentence, when he says that, he redeems himself and his father with one fucking sentence.
That's true.
It is.
Stop poking holes in my theory.
But it is an insanely powerful moment, and it is one of those. It is a scene that makes Jedi probably equal, if not better, than Empire Strikes Back. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, Empire because it's dark." Yeah, sure, okay, fine. But it doesn't have Empire doesn't have a powerful moment like that.
No,
it has
I agree.
moments, but that one it's the climax of the entire trilogy.
I agree.
So, but if you have Luke like 30 years later, it's like, you know what? I said those things. I said I was a Jedi. I pushed like at the moment of maximum temptation, I managed to not fall to the dark side. But later on, there was this party and
I got drunk.
I got drunk. There were chips. I said I wouldn't have any chips, but I lied, fell to the dark side. It undoes everything. It undoes the entire struggle of the first trilogy, of the original movies, the ones that we hold as the gold standard.
Right. No, and I like that. I like that. That makes sense. I think Dark Luke would be cool.
Look, you want to give me like a dream sequence of Dark Luke? You know what? You want to spend the first half of the movie hinting at a Dark Luke through like dreams or something, but then at the very end reveal good Luke? Do that. You'll have me like I will shit my pants in the movie theater. It will be amazing.
It's funny. There's a coworker of mine that I work with who actually used to write for one of the Star Wars blogs, and we talked about that. I'm like, because of the heavy rumor of a Dark Luke, and because of the shroud of secrecy around Luke Skywalker, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they do. They kind of play with the idea of, okay, which side is he on, and then they give it away at the end.
And you know what's great is that one of the things, like J.J. Abrams has shown that he is very comfortable bullshitting his audience before a movie comes out. It's like, no, it's not Khan. Wink.
And he even changed the voiceover in one of the trailers. So where in the movie it was like, go get Khan, and in the trailer it was like, go get that guy.
Go get John Harrison. He totally, but that's the thing. He's comfortable bullshitting the audience. But whereas for Into Darkness, he just, lied. Maybe his techniques on bullshitting the audience has become more sophisticated now.
Right. He's a better liar.
He's a better liar. But yeah, but now you've got me thinking about the idea of them just hinting at Dark Luke for like an hour and a half, and then at the end, like him showing up, just full good Jedi robes, going
like he's glowing in like a blue aura
like
and
backlit. No, backlit coming out of a ship, so if you don't know what the robes are, you don't know the colors.
Right.
But then he turns on the blue lightsaber. You go, oh shit.
No, maybe it's an orange one, so we're still wondering.
It's a color that we have never seen.
Right. Or it's one of the ones from the Old Republic that's like blue with like the black inner, and I don't know if you ever played the SWTOR MOBA.
I have. Yeah, there's some weird things you could do. But yeah, just having that reveal of him being like a Jedi,
right?
I think having him show up with a posse of Jedi. It's like, oh, I failed with that guy, but those other dudes came out right.
Right.
Come on, let's go.
There you go. Hit your microphone. I will say, regardless of any of that, one person that neither of us mentioned was Andy Serkis, and I think Andy Serkis is Darth Plagueis.
Yeah, he's supposed to be something Grandmaster Snoke, which sounds like a terrible name.
Right.
But him coming out to be, because you need a villain that is at this point overarching, like above Darth Sidious.
You need a trilogy villain.
Yes, exactly.
And Plagueis was Sidious's master, who he claimed to kill, and Plagueis was the Sith that was playing with the Force art of eternal life and resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I kind of go towards that, and this might be considered a little spoilery, so
whatever.
If anybody cares, fast forward like 15, 20 seconds, maybe a couple minutes. But Hayden Christensen.
By the way, if you care about the spoiler, I will hunt you down and tell you anyways.
Right.
Because people who are anal about spoilers piss me off.
Hayden Christensen has been seen on the set of Episode 8. So we know that Anakin Skywalker exists in Episode 8 in some form.
Force Ghost.
Whether it's, well, Force Ghost is one possible way, but my theory is that if that Andy Serkis does end up becoming Darth Plagueis, and he was practicing the Force art of resurrection, he resurrects the evil Anakin Skywalker to help combat the newly formed Rebel Alliance or whatever they call themselves.
Yeah, and that's why that's why Kylo Ren is collecting pieces of Darth Vader, because they need the materials to build him back.
I never thought of that.
Hate that theory.
That's cool.
No,
but I do agree that in some way, whether he's Luke's son or Leia's son, I do agree that Kylo Ren is a Skywalker. Well, I guess he'd be a Solo if it's because of Han's name, but because in the trailer when he said that line, "I will fulfill our destiny," that is definitely either a son to father or a son to grandfather type phrase.
But he's talking about the Skywalker destiny.
Exactly.
Because he's not a Sith.
No, so
he's
he's
not the Sith destiny.
Right. So he's related somehow. So maybe he's like a distant cousin of a third relative. I am your father's brother's sister's best friend's former roommate.
The Schwartz.
What does that make us? Absolutely nothing.
I like the idea of the Darth Plagueis thing. I hope that if Hayden Christensen's reprising Anakin Skywalker, it is as a form of Force Ghost in a way. Maybe Darth Plagueis has the ability to enslave and interrogate, the ghosts of Jedi past,
or allow them to exist.
An interesting thing.
Allow them to exist in the physical realm.
Something like that. There's many ways that can be done that aren't silly. I just hope it doesn't become kind of weird. I mean, it's not like Hayden Christensen is the kind of guy that you look at and you go, yeah, Star Wars fan loved him. We should bring him back for the trilogy.
Right. He wasn't as bad as the kid. And
no, but
he was a little whiny in Episode 2. But I really liked him as Dark Anakin in Episode 3. I thought he did great. And that last battle on what was the lava planet?
Mufasar.
Yeah, whatever, something like that. I think you're closer than I would have been. I thought that battle was great, and a lot of people hated it because it was all CGI. It was done on a soundstage, but I thought it looked awesome.
No, it looked great. It was a great battle. It's a battle that doesn't make much sense. Laser swords. Your argument is invalid.
I've got the higher ground. I've got force powers.
Exactly. It's like, none of this shit matters. It's
right.
Whatever. It makes as much sense as when Obi-Wan says, you know what? I'll just let Darth Vader kill me because that'll make me more powerful because I'll be able to. Like, I'm sorry, but Obi-Wan didn't do anything after death that he couldn't have been doing from Yavin on a radio. It's like, Luke, yeah, use the Force. No, I'm not dead. I'm just talking to you on your ship radio instead of as a ghost because I'm still alive instead of committing suicide. Yeah, so just use the Force, man. Just turn off your targeting computer and trust me, use the Force. It works. Chill. All right.
Could have been riding in the Falcon with Solo.
Yeah, exactly. He just shows he's with Solo the Falcon. It's all going well. It's like it was a dumb battle. It was a stupid battle. We have to come to terms with that. So
Star Wars.
Star Wars is about dumb battles. So whatever.
It is.
I'm looking forward to seeing the movie. Here's a dark little secret that a lot of Star Wars fan will have trouble admitting to themselves. But when we walked out of Phantom Menace, we were all tripping balls.
Right.
We didn't give a shit about how crappy some of the scenes were.
I loved the prequels. It was my freshman year in high school when Phantom Menace came out. So I was of that group where we were younger. I didn't mind Jar Jar. I found Jar Jar to be less annoying than C-3PO, which I know is blasphemy for some people.
No, it is the truth. See, there was a few years ago, there was like this flash animation that was saying the 4 things that need to not be done in the new Star Wars so that they don't suck. And one of the things is like nothing should be funny. The first characters that you hear talk in the original, like the gold standard series, is one ambiguously gay robot that tilts around and another trash can rolling around going beep boop beep boop and going back and forth about how one of them is scared and the other is not.
On top of that,
yeah,
go ahead.
This is your first scene in Star Wars.
Right. On top of that, I wonder if people realize that BB-8 is just this generation's Jar Jar and C-3PO. Like, that's what he is. He's the character design. Now, whether he's going to be as annoying or as ambiguously gay, as you put it, is to be determined. But he is the character designed for children.
Exactly. And there will always be that because it's Star Wars. If you want Star Wars to remain pure, you have to accept the things that you loved as a child but hate now, because that's part of the recipe.
Right.
Like another thing that Flash animation was, it's like Star Wars is dirty. Have you seen the Death Star? Like they were complaining that the Naboo ships, like the Naboo, like royal ships, are too clean. You could eat off the floor of the Death Star. There are scenes where you see stormtroopers walking around in corridors, and you can see them perfectly reflected on the floor. Imperial ships are super clean, and there's a reason for that. There's a narrative reason for that. The good guys are dirty because they're the rebels, and the bad guys are clean because they're the Empire. They're the Order. Star Wars isn't clean or dirty. It depends on which side you're looking at.
Right.
And Naboo was clean because Naboo is supposed to represent visually for us, the listener, what Obi-Wan Kenobi described as a more civilized age.
Right.
So anyway,
people will nitpick, and that's, as geeks, as nerds, as fantasy and sci-fi lovers, that's what we do. We find something and we nitpick it, but it allows for, as long as you can nitpick it respectfully and not ignorantly and big-headedly, it allows for fun conversation and different fan theories and a horrible EU.
Exactly.
But let's move forward a little bit.
I
have. We talked a little bit about this in our little pre-show. I have a segment that I want to bring onto this show called the Random Top 10 List.
Right.
And what I'm going to do with this is I am going to pick something that my guest for the week will provide me a top 10 list for in that category. And you are going to be the guinea pig.
That's wonderful.
So,
no preparation.
No, none at all. And nobody will. That's how I want to try this. So for you, and we've already touched on a lot of these things, I think. I want JF's top 10 things about being a geek in today's world.
Like the best things, like my top 10 things that I enjoy?
The best 10 things about being a geek today, when we as geeks essentially rule the world.
Well, okay, I'm going to, at number 10, I guess I should start. Man, it's a long list. I might not get the order correctly, but I'm going to try to come up with 10 things, and we'll see how the order in the end.
Okay.
A lot of things feels like they should be top 1. So number 10, we're getting a lot of the new things that were old. Like we're getting new Star Trek, we're getting new Star Wars. Like a lot of people keep bitching about, oh, everything's being redone. No, this is good. We're getting refreshed versions of the things we used to love. Number 9. We're no longer victims in the media. It's becoming weirder and weirder to make fun of the nerd, to the point where some of the most badass people in the world right now are geeks and nerds. I mean, did you hear that a few years ago, Vin Diesel, arguably one of the most menacing men in Hollywood after The Rock, got an Xbox installed in his Hummer so that when he had to wait somewhere, he could still play video games? I mean,
that's awesome.
You have geeks and nerds in every walk of life, and some of them are the most badass. So making fun of nerds has become a thing of the past, which is great as far as I'm concerned.
Definitely. I just want to say really quick, if it makes it easier for you, don't think of this as a best like 10 to 1. Just the 10 best things about being a geek.
Yeah, I'm trying. Like I said, the order is going to be messed up.
That's what I mean.
Number 8. Then I had a thing. Yeah, we're living in a world with a lot of the stuff that used to be sci-fi is just reality. I mean, you and I are on a video call right now. Like I am looking at you, and we're recording something digitally without tasting. and I have a supercomputer that I'm holding right now. You may recognize it as a phone. It's like a lot of the stuff that used to be just absolutely science fiction is just science fact now, and it's accelerating, which is insane. Number 7, creativity is just unbound. There's one of the things that I find very, very curious is how people manage to find a way to complain that kids today, they can't be creative. Like, I love Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighter. I think he's an amazing musician. He's got some great ideas, and he's seems to be a really good person. But there's this quote attributed to him, which I hope is not really his, that says that, kids today, they don't know art and music. Music is when you go buy a shitty guitar at a pawn shop and you start making music with that. That's really music. And that is like arguably one of the most stupid fucking observation about today that could possibly exist. Because today music is a guy remixing tracks on an iPad. Today music is a dude having an electric guitar, plugging it into his computer, and recording 24 different tracks and overlaying them on a YouTube video. People have like the very means that this quote seems to downplay because they're not how he got into music, undermines how people have unleashed their creativity. Like, a lot of people are bitching about how, people on their computers today. Well, kids on their computers today are taking their phones outdoors and filming each other and making small movies that they put on YouTube for their entire class to see. Creativity has been unleashed on a scale that is just absolutely insane and accelerating. And I'm disappointed that people are not taking more notice of this. Just the fact that I can write a book and publish it in almost instantly. So that's my 7. Sorry, I got a bit carried away.
You got passionate about that one.
Oh man. Well, you're asking me.
Don't bring up Dave Grohl around JF.
No, that's the thing. Like, someone would tell me, though, that's not really a quote from him, and I would go,
I wouldn't be surprised if it was. He doesn't seem like that. But
no, he seems way too chill to have that kind of fucking backwards mentality.
He does.
I say things that are cool about being a geek. You can be a geek about anything now. I have a friend who's a geek about unicycles. I didn't know that was a thing.
What, unicycles, or being a geek about unicycles?
I knew unicycles were a thing, but I thought it was kind of restrained to the realm of circus clowns or some shit. Right. But no, the dude, and like I just out of curiosity, I went, okay, unicycles, and I went to like unicycle shop websites, and like there's an entire fucking culture about that. There's geek level cultures about everything now, and it is fascinating to me. There's no hobby that you can't get into enough that it doesn't become a geek thing now,
dude. People, and I'm sure you've seen me using it right here. People geek about vaping.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's crazy. There's a whole subculture now. They do like cloud chasing contests and build contests. I mean, you put out something. None of this
means anything to me,
right? And you put out something where people can be even the slightest bit creative with it, and you're going to get a geek subculture around it.
Exactly. And to me, that is amazing. It is great. And I guess I can put that in my number 5, is the fact that these geek cultures tend to blend to a certain degree. Like a good example is let's say knitting. You know people that do crochet. Like, they've got their own geeky crochet things where they geek out about the crocheting, but then they'll start crocheting Star Wars characters and bleeding into that geekdom. And everything blends a bit here and there. So, and I'll push that into, I'll push that even further. Like, all the mashup we see, like, Disney princesses as steampunk character illustrations, like everything's mixing in weird and creative and inventive ways. And the geek culture has never been so cool. 5 more, right?
We can make it a top 5. I think you covered like a bunch of different things anyway.
Sorry?
I said I think you covered a bunch of different things. Well,
that's the thing. Like
number 5 is 8 different things. Keep going.
Because I've got like a number 1 that I kind of want to hit. Sorry.
No problem.
And yeah, man. Yeah, I'm trying to think. one of the things that's I don't know where you want to put it. I wanted it to be my top one, but we'll see like if I come up with other things. The fact that now people can make a living off their geekdom in a way that was impossible before. Like I look like a lot of people will like start getting annoyed at the idea of like people like PewDiePie just twitching and making a fortune off of it.
Right.
And to me, that's fascinating. Like I find no joy listening to a show because that's not my thing, but I'm happy it exists because it proves that you can be a geek, and just being a geek, if you're a geek that can communicate well and you can market that geekdom, then you can make a living off of just being a freaking nerd. And that's amazing to me. We were talking about Scott Johnson earlier. His empire is built on the foundation of a podcast, a fan show about World of Warcraft. That is the very definition of making a living off of being a geek.
Right. It's incredible.
Exactly. So, I mean, you can do it for fun like me and Amy do for Overwatch, but you can eventually, if you're good at it, and if you find a niche or niche, as the Americans say, you can make a living off of it. And that to me is fascinating. So, yeah. And number 4, new media is totally a geek thing. And the fact that we keep seeing all these social medias and new media platform pop up with different ideas. I mean, these are all geek-born technologies, if you will. These are not like boardroom decisions like, oh, we'll make a Facebook or we'll make a Twitter. Sure, like the financing probably comes from a board, but there's a nerd or a nerd idea behind making these things. And these things are changing the world in ways that I could go on for a very long time explaining how I have very, very strong theories about where social media and technology is going to push us, and it's very exciting from the point of view of a science fiction writer.
I won't get into it a lot here, but if you haven't yet listened to this week's episode of Current Geek, we're podcasting. Scott's going to come up. But him and Bo Schwartz talk about, and Tom obviously, talk about this when they do their forecast segment. Mm-hmm. About how social media companies are going to become the new governing agents. Like you're going to have I can't explain it the way they did, but it's so I'm not going to be able to.
I listened to that show actually today on my way back. I was driving, so I listened to that show today, so I know what you're talking about. And basically, the idea of social media platforms becoming nation states. I think they're right, but in the same way that saying that a cake contains eggs is right. I mean, essentially that's true, but it is only a part of the story.
Right.
Because like one of the not a mistake, but one of the limitations that a lot of futurists or sci-fi writers or enthusiasts tend to make when they're coming up with theories like that is to kind of think in a silo. It's like, what can happen with social media? But you have to think, what can happen with social media and how does it connect to the thousands of other technologies that are evolving alongside it? And you have to predict this in kind of a synergistic manner.
Right.
So, yes, the idea that social medias are going to become more powerful and can become sort of their own nation state is interesting. But I'm way more curious about how culture is, how to say, dissolving and reforming in a new shape. Like, let me give you an example, and we're going on a tangent here.
Of course,
but this is like it's an interesting thing. You'll notice that there's a solid dissolution in national and religious culture. Like religion is meaning less and less with every generation, which is kind of normal. Like we're entering a new age of reason to a certain degree. People are disagreeing maybe a bit too aggressively with what religion means, but at the same time, national identity doesn't mean exactly what it used to mean either. Like, especially if you take very, very mellow countries like, say, Canada, like I don't wave a flag and I don't identify myself as a Canadian, at least not as much as I identify myself as a sci-fi fan or as a video gamer. And the thing is, because of the interconnectivity and the international positioning of the internet, people are connecting culturally, not with cultures that are imposed upon them through tradition and geographical location, that is like religion or nationality. They're connecting to cultures and identifying with cultures that have to do with interest and abilities and what they want to do with their lives. And these make for way more powerful cultural bonds. So where we're seeing a dissolution of certain cultures, we're seeing new cultures form. And since one of the part of the theory that they were talking about, the idea that boundaries, like physical boundaries, mean less and less, I think we're moving towards new cultures, new cultural identities that are based entirely on things that people are passionate about. I think instead of what people have, where people live, and what people believe.
I think that wraps back into one of the things about being a geek today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look at that. We tangented it. Is that a word?
We looped it right back.
We looped-de-looped. That's
Oh shit. Here's one thing that's really cool about being a geek today.
Okay.
Something that's super exciting.
Let's finish it off with this one, and then we'll move on to questions from the audience.
Sure. I'm not sure we did top 10,
That's
but
fine.
we talked about a bunch of cool things. But this one's actually, it'll speak to you.
All right.
We can, as geeks, we are in a situation right now where if we have something interesting or intelligent to say to one of our geek idols, it is by far not impossible, but even very likely that we can get into that conversation with that person. And that to me is amazing. If I go back even just 10 years and I wanted to have a conversation with, say, Neil Gaiman, I think I have something interesting to say to him, I would need to track him down at a convention and hope he has a moment to listen to me.
Right.
Now I can send him an email. I can try tweeting to him. I may not get his attention, but it is significantly more likely, especially if what I have to say is intelligent and interesting to him and is not just pandering, that I can engage him in conversation. I took Neil Gaiman as an example, but he's a bad example because he's not super renowned for engaging people. But there are a lot of freaking nerd celebrities that are super easy to engage in conversation, and that is super exciting. And I'm gonna add a top, like a last one.
Number one, the big one. All right.
It's not the big one, but it's one that's actually very interesting.
Okay.
Is that we have seen a sort of equalization of, especially in the nerd culture, of what is considered a celebrity. There are people, we keep bringing up Scott Johnson, but like it's a good example because he is a minor celebrity in the podcasting industry. But the thing is, there are people, and I'm sure we could pick them out, especially in the Frog Pants community, that would be more happy having dinner with Scott Johnson than they would be having dinner with J.J. Abrams, because they feel more of a connection to him. And we're seeing this kind of leveling where minor celebrities, people that would 10 years ago have been completely ignored, even by people who are fans of what they do,
right,
are being more recognized or being able to engage with their audience more, and are able, like 10 years ago, a Felicia Day would not have been able to exist.
Right. Oh, no, definitely.
And today she's the biggest thing on earth.
She's also going to be part of the new MST3K.
I love Felicia Day, and I'm not sure it's a good choice, but yeah. I'm willing to wait and see.
We'll see.
I don't know. I'm hoping she's got the acting chops for it, or that it's comedic enough, but I don't know.
So the number one thing is that Felicia Day is able to be a celebrity.
No, not Felicia Day specifically, but I mean, you look at all the people that are like, I mentioned PewDiePie earlier. I mean, people are able to not to. And no, and that's a bad example. But how can I say? Will Wheaton. Will Wheaton hasn't done anything significant in the in Star Trek or geekdom except for being geek celebrity, geek royalty, and
Big Bang
works.
Theory.
Exactly, it works. What Will Wheaton does right now, Wootstock and all his other like blogging and all his other types of engagement, you go back 15 years and none of that is possible.
Right. It's
amazing.
Yeah, it definitely is, and it's. I mean, you mentioned meeting Scott or anybody like that, and as somebody who got into podcasting because of people like Scott and Tom and even Garrett, I was a big fan of Garrett Weinzierl's before I ever picked up a microphone, and I told that I mentioned that to them when I met them at BlizzCon back in 2014, and I was like, you guys are a huge inspiration, and you're a big reason that I do this thing that I now have a lot of fun doing. And that meant more to me. And you mentioned J.J. Abrams. I mean, now it might be a little bit different because he makes Star Wars. But, like meeting Johnny Depp, for example, would be like, okay, yeah, that's hey, you cool photo op. You make movies. Cool.
Yeah. What do I have to say to Johnny Depp or him to me? Nothing. There's no conversation there. But I had I would say at Nerdtacular last summer, I got to chit chat for 15 minutes with Daryl Skills, the Trek nerd from TMS.
Right.
And that conversation has more value than if I did get a chance to talk to Johnny Depp, because what the fuck would I talk to Johnny Depp about?
It's like, hey, you're
a pirate once.
I was about to say the same thing. That's fist bump, bro.
Exactly. Awesome. Good for you.
Well, we had
Definitely.
I liked that. That was fun. I've edited the show notes, so now it's the top 10 asterisk things.
There you go. Top 10 whatever.
Yeah. So we had some people write in. Being episode 1, I did some shameless self-promoting. So some tadpoolers and your own co-host wrote in to ask you a couple of questions.
Oh, great. I can't wait to see what my co-host asked.
So we had I hope I don't. I'm gonna pull a Scott and screw this guy's name up. Joe Terzivia, Terzz.
Oh, okay, I know who that is.
Okay,
Joseph Terzivia. Yeah.
Okay.
Even I massacred his name. That's great.
I was close.
Sorry,
or as
Joe.
close as you were. And he says, "Here's a question for JF, and I hope he gives a good answer. How did you become so talented and handsome?"
This is gonna be painful.
Here's some self-promotion.
Right. Well, I'm talented and handsome. First, how long do I have to answer each of these?
A little bit of time.
All right. I don't believe in talent. I think talent is. I have a very, very long speech I could give about that, and actually I have a blog post I can refer people to. In my opinion, talent is the word that people who don't want to put the effort into things use to make excuses for why they don't do things. People that are good at things are good because they work at it, they put time into it, and they're passionate about it enough that they don't mind putting the time into it. So that's actually saying that someone is talented is basically saying that they have a magical power. Like, oh, you're a wizard, Harry. Well, bullshit. People that are good at things is because they work at it. So if you think I'm good at something, first of all, fooled you.
Fooled you.
Anything I'm good at is because I'm doing a lot of it. And usually, being that I'm naturally lazy, if I'm doing a lot of it, it's because I really like doing it. As for being handsome, here's the trick. You don't see my bald spot because I'm tall. But it's there. It's there.
So hard work and height.
Hard work and height.
Neil Patel wrote in and said, "Hi, guys. I got a simple question, I hope. How did you get started on your novels? Did you start writing and then flesh it out, or outline the plot and then start filling in the details?"
I find what I'm discovering that is every author's process is a bit different, but here's how I go about it. I usually have an idea, very, very general idea of what I want the story to be, basically what my theme is. For Life Engineered, I want to basically theorize about what a world with only robots would be, and how do we go from today to a world with only robots. After that, I wrote a general outline of what I want the story to be, but very, very general. No, I put more specific details into the characters themselves than I do into the storyline. Then I write a very rough draft, very quick rough draft, so that I know where each element is going to be. And then I go back and do and replan, sort of observe what the draft looks like, pick out some elements, and create a structured outline upon which I can rewrite the story. So it basically goes a bit of planning, a bit of writing, a lot more planning, a lot more writing.
Interesting.
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
Probably too complicated. I should streamline that a bit.
Zach Bryson writes in and says, if you had to pick one book, one album, and one film to put into a time capsule as your faves for posterity, which would you choose?
Is posterity other people, or is it like for me?
He didn't specify.
I'll assume it's for me.
He says a time capsule, so I guess
probably not for me.
No, it's probably for people in whatever time period the capsule is meant to be opened. I guess maybe the best way would be to I don't know. Answer it however you see fit.
All right. The movie is simple. It would be Nightmare Before Christmas because it is super timeless, and it can be enjoyed by any generation, any time. So that to me should probably remain. One album. Oh, fuck. Because my tastes keep changing all the time. Like I usually really love an album until I then find something else that I really love. I would say
if you had to pick it right now, yeah.
Yeah, right now I've been listening to Drink the Sea by Glitch Mob like on repeat for maybe the past 4 months, so almost exclusively. So probably that. I think that will survive. If not that, the soundtrack to Tron Legacy. There
you go.
I like me some techno these days, apparently. And the book is harder. Like if I wanted to pick a book, like my knee-jerk reaction is Clive Barker's Galilei, but I don't think this would resonate with everyone equally. So
I'll modify that question a little bit, and I'll take the liberty of saying one book or maybe one book series. For example, you couldn't include The Sorcerer's Stone without including the other 5. So book or book series.
I'm gonna go off the grid on that one and say the Dragonbone Chair trilogy by Tad Williams, because it is, and this is gonna sound like blasphemy, in my opinion, the purest, best written fantasy series. I think it is better. It is a tighter tale and more interesting story than than Lord of the Rings, because it has a lot less singing and is a lot less all over the place. It's follows a better storyline, even though it's got a lot of the same themes. Like Dragonbone Chair is essentially has every cliche just told in a better way. And I think it's better than Game of Thrones because it balances the darkness and the lightness much more moderately. Like there's really dark scenes with a dude like with broken legs in the north freezing to death and shit like that, but at the same time there's also some lighter things that happen. It's also got one of the best description of what elf warfare would be like and how both beautiful and terrifying it can be. And one of the things I like is authors that can contrast beauty and horror in the same scene and make them flow together well. So yeah, that trilogy. Put that in the time capsule.
And what was the name of that again?
The Dragonbone Chair trilogy.
Dragonbone Chair?
Yeah, by Tad Williams. It is...
I'll have to check it out.
Oh, you should. You're going to read it and you're going to go, I know where this is going. And you're going to see a lot of there's a lot of tropes in the first half of the first book. And then it never goes completely off the rails, but every time it brings up something that feels cliche, it either explains it better than any other fantasy author has in the past, or turns it on its head a bit.
Cool.
So it's got like the peasant with a destiny, and it's got the mysterious wizard in the tower and the ancient evil from the past. It's got all these tropes, all these cliches, but done better than anybody else has done it so far.
Awesome. And now the moment you've been waiting for, the 3 questions from Miss Amy Frost. And I am going to ask you these, what I would assume is in the order of which she would deem the most important. So the first one is, what is the most efficient way to obsessively sort your Skittles?
Greens, then yellows, then purples, then orange, and finally red.
All right. The second one is, what is the next video game you plan on being terrible at?
I think I'm going to stick to being terrible at Overwatch for a while. I'm hoping to be terrible at Overwatch for ages.
All right. And I think what she would feel is the most important question is, how do you manage to con your podcast co-host into doing all of the production work while still getting the top billing for the show?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I get top billing for any of the shows I'm on. And the way I con them is simple. I'm too incompetent to do sound work myself, and I tend to associate with people who are good and like doing sound work. So they don't want the podcast to be of low quality, and they enjoy doing it, so they do it.
Fair enough. And Overcast sounds great, so she made the right choice.
Yeah, no, if I was doing the production work on Overcast, it would just be coughing, just an hour of coughing. It'd be amazing.
Awesome. Well, JF, I can't thank you enough for being the first guest.
No, this was super fun.
I
so chill.
I almost don't want to end, but we're going on 2.5 hours.
I do that to podcasts.
It's great, dude. It's great. I told you, was a little nerve-wracked coming into an episode 1. You never know how the first episode of a new show is going to work. I was looking over the show notes before I got you on call, and I was like, all right, I got enough material for maybe about a half hour, 45 minutes worth of discussion.
I think I like to call this the JF effect, where I will at least double the planned time of a podcast.
Right. You have now set a precedence.
It's because I can't shut up.
It's all good, man. That's a podcast. You're not supposed to shut up. It's all good. We do this because we love to talk.
Oh yeah, definitely. And this was super fun. I love this. I love being. This is the first podcast where I can really just cut loose and just chat about nerdy things in general. This is great. It's
awesome.
Fun.
Well, I'm really glad you came on, and we'll definitely have to have you on again soon when I have enough space on my upload plan to put a 3-hour show up.
Well, look, if you're looking for time to have me on, like at some point when we get close to March 1st, I'm gonna go on a huge fucking promotional spree where I'm gonna try to be everywhere.
For sure, we'll definitely get you on then, and maybe even have something for the listeners. Who knows?
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah. So for the listeners that enjoyed you and want to follow you and learn more about you, where can people track you down on this lovely internet?
You can find me on Twitter at J.F.Dubeau. That's J.F.D.U.B.E.A.U. I spell it because it's weird. And if you want to pre-order, purchase my books, or just know what I'm doing as far as creative endeavors are concerned, you can go to my website at jfdubeau.com. Same thing, jfdubeau.com. And if you like what you heard about the books, you can if you go on jfdubeau.com/books, you'll find links to synopsis, sample chapters, and all sorts of things. And one thing I'm doing that's kind of weird for A God in the Shed, since I've got the draft finished, but I'm doing this contest where if people pre-order before, anybody that pre-orders before the book gets funded, once the book gets funded, I'm going to pick a name at random, and I'm going to have a chat with that person to include their likeness in the book, and then have that character killed gruesomely. It's going to be awesome.
Awesome. So if you want to get killed in J.F.Dubeau's book, you can, and they just simply pre-order it?
They just pre-order it, and I'll draw. And if you want more entries, if you successfully refer the book, you get more entries into the draw.
Awesome. And that's right at jfdubeau.com/books.
Exactly. That's where you'll find all the links.
Very cool. And then obviously your podcast, The Overcast.
Yes. Yeah. Amy's going to kill me if I don't say that. If you go to overcastpodcast.com, you will find our podcast. You can also find us on Facebook. And it's like I said, it's not a news podcast. It's a podcast about opinions, speculation, and just general tomfoolery regarding Overwatch. And I like to think it's fun. It's fun to record.
Cool. Well, that sounds good. I like listening to it. So
cool. Thank you.
Other people need to listen to it, especially when you can't play the game.
It's the podcast is fun right now, and no one can play. when people can play, it's going to be such a blast.
Oh,
to do.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. Well, as for this show, you can follow us on Twitter at IG_Mind of a Geek. And you can find the schedule of upcoming guests as well as the show notes for all of our episodes at inkedgeekstudios.com/mindofageek. If you have a question or comment for an upcoming guest, you can email the show at mindofageekpodcast@gmail.com. And as always, if you enjoy the content that we provide for you here at Inked Geek Studios, please take a little time to go over to patreon.com/IG Studios and help show your support for the content that we provide you. Our guest next week is going to be Miss Abby Wessels. Abby Wessels is the host of the podcast Diary of a Transgendered Woman. And she's awesome. She's also a member of our Tadpool community here. And she's got a lot to talk about, and she's got a lot of opinions and a lot of suggestions as far as growing up as a transgender and making the transition into that lifestyle and the trials and tribulations. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot into those subjects when she comes on next week. So
Can I say something about Abby?
Go right ahead.
I've actually been, since I write about robots that don't necessarily have a gender, but I just sometimes choose gender identity, I've been asking her a ton of questions to better understand that mentality.
Well, maybe you should write in a question for her next week.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, Abby's like super well informed and super intelligent. You'll have an amazing conversation with her.
Awesome. Yeah, she's really cool, and I certainly am excited to have a conversation there, and we'll see if it lasts 2.5 hours. But again, thank you, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed episode 1 of Mind of a Geek. I had a blast, and thank you again so much for coming on. It's been a lot of fun.
And well, thanks for having me on anytime. This was a super bunch of fun.
Definitely, sir. Definitely. Again, IG_Mind of a Geek on Twitter. inkedgeekstudios.com/mindofageek. You can subscribe to this podcast wherever podcasts are found. We are on Stitcher. We are on iTunes and anywhere else. 5 stars if you liked the show. It definitely helps the show get noticed and will help bring in more people to help keep the show going. For Mr. J.F.Dubeau.
The Mind of a Geek podcast is brought to you by...
Wrong one. See, look, episode 1 jitters. Wrong stupid soundboard button. For J.F.Dubeau, for myself, thank you so much. And have a great day. All right. 2.5 hours later.
That was fun.
I know. Thank you, man. That was a blast.
I'm sorry about the length.
No, don't. I was worried. Now my only concern is if people hear it, they're like, "Am I gonna have to do 2.5 hours?"
I don't know what it is that I do that it just every podcast I'm on that I'm a guest, they keep going and going. I guess I have too much fun recording these, and I just won't shut up.